What's up, everyone, and welcome to the new season of Roll Queue. New season, new set, new types of guests. Instead of SPL pros, we've got some of the devs. This was a big request for a lot of you guys at home, and I'm excited to do it because I think we're gonna have some fun stories. Of course, we've got Pon, AJ, and Clumsy joining us. Guys, first of all, thanks for taking the time out of your busy days. I want to start with where you guys started. What inspired you to become a dev in the first place? Pon, we can start with you.
I mean, just kind of growing up and playing a whole bunch of games and just like seeing, like my favorite thing to do in a lot of those games was to break it. I have vivid memories of in Super Mario 64, you could go to the top of the castle, you can clip into the castle, fall below, and get behind the door. You open the door from the other side, and it warps you to the other side of the like you go back into the castle like you should, but you're on the wrong side of the door. And that just fascinated me, like, how in the world does this all work? And then, of course, when I got older, I got involved in esports, and then from there, I got an opportunity to actually work on a game. I was like, nah, I have to take this. This is, like, too cool.
Yeah, absolutely. AJ?
Oh, man. It could be a really long story or a really short story.
That's what the show's for.
You know, but because I have a degree in environmental engineering. So I went to college and completely studied and completed a completely different career path. And I was actually working in that career path, but I was having a little bit trouble finding a job. I worked briefly as a field surveyor, which are the guys with the yellow tripods on the side of the road.
What do those do, by the way?
It's measuring specific points in geographical points.
So it's like, okay.
So like if you want to have a lot line for a new building,
Sure.
the only way to know exactly where that border is to have surveyors. And we base off of monument points buried in the ground, and then we do the precise measurements to like track those out for you and give you the exact like XYZ coordinates, you know,
Interesting.
and the elevation and all that stuff.
Okay.
It was a fun job. I liked it. It didn't pay very well.
Sure.
And I was going to try to be an AutoCAD drafter as an engineering, which was actually AutoCAD is very similar to like a game engine software, as I learned later. But I had a knack for software, and I always loved games growing up. There's a picture of me like 5 years old playing Mario on Nintendo and stuff like that, and I played games all growing up. But since I had such a hard time finding a job in that career, I found that there was a game dev master's program in my hometown of Orlando, and I applied to that, and I got in, and then it's just been amazing ever since. There's been no looking back.
Yeah, absolutely. Clumsy, how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time with my younger cousins as well, and we were gaming, playing GoldenEye and stuff, you know, from all those days. And then as I grew older, I wasn't really that close to all my friends in my middle school and high school. I mean, geographically close.
Right.
So using games as an outlet to be able to meet them was really helpful. So, I mean, I spent most of my evenings, whether it's playing Diablo or something like that, using that as an opportunity to actually spend time with my friends, other than actually seeing them. And since I spent so much time doing that over the course of the years, I kind of just grew more in love with not just playing games, but wanting to actually join the gaming industry. And then similarly to Pon, you know, I found a route with the esports, and from there I got an opportunity to join an actual gaming company, and I was like, I'm definitely not going to miss that chance.
For sure.
That's a common theme, I bet, amongst a lot of us. Like, not just enjoying games and playing by ourselves, but like playing with our friends. I have two younger brothers, and we would live next door to three other brothers that were about the same age as us, and all we did was Smash tournaments, Halo tournaments. Like, we played MMOs together. The only way I keep in contact with a lot of my childhood friends is our Discord channel. We play SMITE together. We play all sorts of games together.
Absolutely.
It's like that constant presence in your life really encourages, I think, people to push themselves beyond just being like an enthusiast or a competitor into actually being a developer.
Yeah, I remember making our own Ethernet cables to do LANs.
Oh my God.
We had to get like the proper split
Yeah,
set
to
up,
like
right?
strip
So
the
that you
cables
could
and
you had to
everything.
strip them, hook them up so that you could actually have the Xboxes linked.
Oh my
And they
gosh.
all had their own special name, and that's when you found out what your Xbox's name was. It was in the Halo lobby.
Right.
That stuff was super cool.
And we did the same thing, and that eventually became the big LAN party that I still throw.
It's famous on Reddit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we still do every year. I think we've done it 8 years in a row. But even before then, we used to do it. We used to do Warcraft 3 parties. Mostly we do tower defenses and the custom modes and stuff like that. That's like that community aspect, I think, was really big. The only game that I really feel like I played completely, pretty much solo, that had a really big impact on my life was Dark Souls.
Sure.
Yeah.
That game changed my life.
Yeah, you talk about it all the time, and that's actually exactly where I was going to throw my next question. What are some games that shaped you as a developer? Not games that you just necessarily love to play or anything like that, but like changed the way that you think about game development or games that you think about, when you're trying to make decisions. You mentioned Diablo and that kind of stuff. I'm guessing that's
there were a lot of different social games that I wanted to play when I was growing up and becoming a fully fledged gamer. I didn't actually play that many single player games. I always loved the community aspect. So whether it was StarCraft custom lobbies, because I actually never got into Warcraft back in the day. My friends just like StarCraft better for some reason, or World of Warcraft is probably the biggest one for me. Is getting to know communities there, going in to start becoming more of a hardcore gamer by joining just battlegrounds or raids. I think that's really what pushed me over to the next step of gaming. Sure. I think World of Warcraft is probably my biggest inspiration.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not alone in that one.
For me, it was early childhood. It was all Nintendo. So Nintendo, I feel like you have a couple different facets of game design and game dev, and I kind of acquired them from different places. So Nintendo really gave me the theme and fun and sense of just how a game can come together, even if it's simple. If it's pretty and has strong characters and strong tone and great music, and it all just comes together, you don't have to have crazy difficult mechanics. I just loved Kirby,
Yeah.
Just that's one of the easiest games you could generally play. The guy, you can't even fall on the cliffs, right? You could fly infinitely.
Right.
Stuff like that. Still really fun. And then I would say Magic the Gathering for the structural, more like a design structure, because I started playing Magic really young when I was in middle school or something like that. I've been playing the game for 20 years. And just the rules text and the interactions and the way they designed the game to be infinitely interactive. And me and Aggro still play Magic together.
All the time.
But I've been playing forever. And that, I think, really helped me when I started studying actual game design and working on my school projects, just having the idea of templated rules text and consistency and interactions being something that I had grown up with naturally for years.
Yeah.
I feel like that helped me transition into game design really well. Then it was MMOs, specifically Dark Age of Camelot, which I know, like we said, the community aspect was probably really big for all of us.
Yep.
Since I grew up with a lot of people around me that would play games, a lot of kids a little older than me, so they were like, why are you still playing Kirby when there's Ultima Online? I literally murdered a man.
Oh my gosh.
Took all of the gold that they farmed for months, and it's mine now. And I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. So I missed Ultima a little bit. I was still really young at the time my friends were playing that, but I got into Dark Age of Camelot well before World of Warcraft. And I remember when World of Warcraft came out, and all of us Dark Age players were like, nah, I'm not switching to that new stuff. I'm going to stick with the real old school business. And I resisted WoW for a while, but I eventually played it too.
And you never were into RuneScape, right? Because that was the one
I skipped
WoW
RuneScape. No, I skipped RuneScape.
I was making cannonballs and
I played a lot of different MMOs that I would just power to max level and play a little bit, but it was pretty much just Dark Age of Camelot, the only one I really played consistently and had friends in. I still have a group of friends that I play Dark Age of Camelot with every now and then. And then the one I mentioned earlier really was Dark Souls.
Yep.
That I played when I was kind of struggling to find my career in engineering. I was living at home, I was arguing with my family because I was I had this okay job but not great, or I kept getting contract jobs, not full time, and it was just frustrating and depressing. And I played through Dark Souls, and it was just so difficult, but overcoming that difficulty just really inspired me that in life you can overcome these difficulties. It was really weird, and it's just conquering Dark Souls at the same time as getting into that master's program. I beat that game right around the same time I applied to that. It was really awesome. Weird alignment, and then things have been going ever since. Of course, got shout outs to SMITE too.
Yeah,
I started playing SMITE since day one, pretty much of closed beta, or day 3 or something like that. Me and my friends got beta invites because we played Global Agenda.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's right.
One of my friends got one and gave all the codes to my other friends. I was the 6th person or something like that because I was busy or I hadn't talked to them in a week or so. I was like, what are you guys doing? I need a code. So I had to buy into the closed beta. And it was $8 or something like that. And I used those gems to buy Anubis.
Nice.
And that's the whole history.
And then it started.
And then that's when the Anubis love started right away. Anubis was also the first god I purchased for.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, same one for me.
Although I fell in love and played Sobek, but Anubis is still dope.
Sure. Pon, how about for you?
Yeah, so I think the 2 games that stand out to me are one, Wind Waker, because when Wind Waker came out, I was definitely in the kind of graphics are the thing, and I want combat, I want action, and then I got Wind Waker, and I was I I don't know if I'm gonna like this. I'm gonna be sailing around the sea, just kind of open world. I'm gonna like it's cartoon cell shading style, and that game to me really solidified all the pieces coming together of what like environment and story and like these systems and what their purposes can bring to a game to really just create a cohesive experience. Wind Waker was that for me, and then World of Warcraft was really where I realized that I was actually really bad. I remember being a frost mage at the start of BC, end of vanilla, and being like, polymorph is a useless ability. Like, why would I CC someone when if I damage them, which is what I want to do, it's going to break them out and it's going to heal them while they're doing it. And then I went from that same BC cycle to actually end up being a gladiator, really learning all the things, understanding combat, really diving into the nuance and how really small things like adding like sap being on the same like diminishing returns as polymorph change the whole dynamic of like Mage Rogue Priest and like how interconnected all those systems are and how complicated something like World of Warcraft balance really is.
Yep.
That to me really got me focused on like theory crafting and trying to find deep understanding in these games. And so that was probably where I started my path towards doing more esports stuff and being more competitive.
Sure.
Did you ever need to do any Lua macro scripts or anything like that?
So I did have Lua macro scripts. We had kill macros for grounding totem and other totems.
Nice.
They had to patch that out because that was actually too strong.
Too strong.
Because you could immediately kill any totem that any
as it
shaman
was
plays.
spawning, yeah.
Yeah, like so like I was often like on the edge of doing the things that they then had to patch out later because like that was the
Nice.
thing that was breaking the game. So
That's a really good point too, because actually we could talk about if we did any game dev style things well before.
Sure.
Which I really didn't do that much. I was really fascinated with games, but and I started my education and started doing more. But the one I really remember was Heroes of Might and Magic. So that's a top-down strategy game. I used to play with my friends a lot. It had a map editor in the game.
Okay.
And I used to spend a lot of time building heroes maps for me and my friends to play. Both like crazy ones as well as me like doing my best to recreate like balanced ones that felt natural and fit into the environment and the themes of the rest of the game played. That was the one game development thing I really felt like I was doing before I even knew that this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
Sure.
Now that you mentioned that as well, I didn't even think about it. But Counter-Strike for me was I really fell in love with the surf maps, and so I delved into the Valve's Hammer Editor, which is a whole behemoth, and I started trying to make surf maps, and that was probably my first like dev experience, and that was really cool.
A lot of people start with modding or something like that, but I was just doing maps. I guess those simple little maps. It was a really simple editor. Like you did not have to. It was tile based. You just grab the little widgets and click them and drop them. Nothing as difficult as actually using a real engine or anything like that.
yeah, the Warcraft 3 map editor was also like that. I had like TD maps laid out for
That was
pathing and stuff.
intimidating to me, honestly, growing up. I did a little bit of it, but never made anything even really playable.
Yeah, I don't think I ever did anything past downloading Forge maps in Halo. That was as far as I went. Downloading other people's work,
Right.
and then playing on them. That's all I wanted to do. You guys all mentioned that you played Smite for a long time before you ended up coming on to Hi-Rez and working here. I know I had this same experience. What was your thought process like when I get in there, I'm going to teach them how to fix Giannis or whatever, right? It's going to be so easy. How do these idiots not see
Oh my gosh.
how to do this? And then you get there and you're like,
hurts.
I understand now. What did you have a moment like that at all?
Actually, yeah. So one moment was I kind of just come in. I was doing some QA stuff, and it was around the time Bologna was releasing, and Bologna released very, very strong, right?
Oh,
Right.
she was balanced.
And I was in those tests, and I gave feedback on how I felt the game was going and how I felt like the character felt and everything. But what you don't see behind the scenes is all the development that goes into that, the context you have of when you're creating each ability, where you feel strengths are, where you feel strengths aren't. The amount of matchups that can possibly exist in a game are often really hard to balance around. Other item balance that might be happening, so you might actually be playtesting on certain item balance, and then you know that item balance is going to change, and you just have to predict, is that going to invalidate a lot of the balance I've done before that. And again, just like how World of Warcraft kind of taught me that everything's so interconnected, it's really easy to be looking at something and working on something, and then it goes live and it's either undertuned or overtuned, and that's an almost impossible moving target to actually ever hit.
Yep.
Because not only do you have to care about their actual numerical strength, but you also have to care about how people perceive their numerical strength.
Yep.
And that can be very, very difficult. And so Release Bologna taught me that lesson pretty quick.
I think Release Bologna taught a lot of people a lot of things very quickly, for what it's worth.
My situation is interesting because I didn't pay super close attention to a lot of the community aspects of Smite when I was just a Smite player. I would just play the game. I wasn't necessarily reading patch notes every day, or I wasn't really like looking into the forums or Reddits or social media or anything for Smite. I wasn't really following any of that. So I really learned how important that whole side of it was once I started working here. Sure. And even I had been working on games before, but I was working on a mobile game based on a big IP. It was a Cars game. It was a kid's game. So there was really no like social.
No esports for Cars Mobile?
No, unfortunately not. And the company, we didn't even have a community manager at the company because it just wasn't a thing.
Right.
We had like marketing people and web people that ran the websites and like the support team and stuff like that. So it was just like that was kind of off my radar. And even I guess like as a gamer growing up, that was never really my thing. Even when I played Dark Age of Camelot for years, I never really remember having like a visceral reaction to a buff or a nerf.
Right.
I remember the expansions coming out, you know, that was big. That was like a new game almost. And I have opinions about those, but I don't remember being like, oh my God, they nerfed my sorcerer. I can't play it anymore. I just loved my sorcerer. I didn't give a shit. I probably can't curse on this show. Sorry.
No, you can. Feel free. There are no rules here.
That's not water that Aggro is drinking right now.
But I wanted to play.
Whiskey.
I was going to play that class no matter what. So that was really eye-opening when I came here. And honestly, you even can see that change in the design team's philosophy. And as I was hired as a God designer, working under some more experienced designers, and now leading the team, and how I've continued to push us more and more towards focusing on that social aspect, that perception aspect, as Pawn referenced. Was really a big change. I also did try to, of course, I did try to nerf Janice as soon as they hired me too. And they were like, hold on, let me show you the stats. And I was like, wow, how does everybody suck with him? And that's also when we learned that. And I've reiterated this I've reiterated
he
this.
He betrayed you.
It's
from day one.
But I backed off relatively quickly when they showed me the stats. But this brings up 2 points. One is people, and this is the players, always don't factor this in. The hit area and the speed and the animation time is really, really impactful to the actual win rate of the God.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if it does 1,000 damage and stuns. If it's impossible to hit, it's going to make a bigger effect than the damage change, than the CC. The hit area and the timing is super important. And when people are like just reading kits on paper and, you know, reacting to stuff being OP or weak, they never factor that in. Like, oh, this ability actually looks kind of hard to hit. Like it's because depending on your play group, it might not matter to you. Like if you're playing with us, right? And I remind you guys of this a lot in the balance meetings. I'm like,
all the time.
Aggro, remember, you're good at this game.
Right.
So you don't realize sometimes that people are going to miss Janus abilities. But when you average in the stats with a lot more players, or even when you just cut out the top 1% and average in the other, let's even say the above 50% players, still the okay players.
Right.
Those difficult abilities start to tank God's stats
quickly.
It's important.
We were just running into this a few weeks ago with Mulan, right? So we were just like tuning in with those numbers, and we kind of got to this point where it's like, okay, she's a warrior and she's just doing a lot of damage. I think right now in the patch notes when we reveal, people are just like, that's a lot of base damage, but in reality, depending on the circumstances, right, Giannis's difficulty might be hitting the actual abilities and the type of abilities they are, but Mulan's difficulty is the range, right? Everything is really short range, and if you need to be up close in front of someone, well, in the solo lane, whether Osiris or Sun Wukong is hitting you from a mile away, you can't get off that base damage, or because you're channeling each ability, you might get knocked up or silenced or anything. So there's a lot of context between all those changes.
100%.
All
but
those
then
numbers.
what really ends up mattering and brings me back full circle is that the actual stats, the players don't care about that.
Sure. Right.
We tried implementing sets of changes based on trust us, this is what the data says, this is what needs to happen. And, you know, even people in the community have suggested like a game could balance itself, right? It just needs to know which gods are overperforming. And the truth of the matter is that people react really negatively to stat-only balanced, because many times the stats and their perception do not match up at all. Right. Or they're looking at a very specific, I'm only looking at high MMR arena, or I'm only looking at gold conquest. And those are like such different things.
Yep. I love getting new hires, especially like high level players and that kind of stuff. And they come in and they see the win rate charts for the first time and they're like, no, there's no, for years it was no way Arachne is that high, right? Like no way. And finally,
and then people even often are like, okay, well, it's just the noobs. And I'm like, okay, let's run it again, but just diamond it up.
Right.
And it's like, it's still
Arachne, Hades, Nike.
And Hades are somehow still winning the most games, and Janus is losing them all, and Morgan are like losing them all.
King Arthur. And
they're like, how is that possible? because the game is hard. You
Yeah.
know, the gods that are hard are especially hard.
Yep, absolutely. Clumsy, what was your first order of business that you thought was going to be easy?
I don't know. When I first came in and joined the dev team, I think from the QA position, it wasn't so much that I wanted to get in and get stuff changed. I was kind of just excited to be able to contribute and finally like talk to all the designers and be like, hey, you guys actually want my opinion on what this new starting item? I know I still vividly remember Pawn Caps and I on like the beanbag area, and we basically all together in the 20 minutes like designed Bluestone Pendant in its very first iteration. I was like, that was just really cool experiences. Or joining the God design meetings and being able to contribute. For example, one of the first ones I think I contributed was Ratatoskir's Acorn idea with Dry Bear, and we just fleshing those ideas out. As for wanting to get things changed, I think the only visceral memories I have of that is like, oh, you know, I think someone wanted to get Agni buffed a little bit, so let's just join this playtest and play Agni against them and kind of just show them why he doesn't need to be buffed right now. Just the small stuff like that. We don't do that often anymore, but like, you know, sometimes when you need to get some balance done, you just want to find some fun, interesting changes.
Yep.
You know, you got to make sure you know which direction to go.
I remember one of those. I don't know if you remember this, AJ, but we were talking, I think it was going into season 4 about everyone thought Hades was bad, and it was to the point where you guys were just throwing your hands up, be like, if they want him to be good, we'll just remove the explosion, like decrease damage on minions and see what happens. And I was like, let me play test it and see what happens. And I think I insta killed Tina on like 3 waves in a row, and I was like, no one's gonna be able to play around that. And they were like, okay, understood.
We have made Hades the best god in the game 2 or 3 different times.
Yeah.
People still don't believe us when we do it. But
one
you know.
day, there's no way a character with a 2-second fear is bad. I will say that until the day I die. There's no way.
Fair.
It's not possible. It's on a regular ability.
But it depends on the context, right? Like I tried playing him a lot recently after the buffs, mostly in PC, high MMR, pre-made team comps type of bracket, playing against a lot of other, like I was playing with my friends, playing against a lot of other pre-made parties. He's really hard to play in those scenarios because people turn and focus you
Melee range,
really quickly.
Yep.
And the coordination makes it so much harder. When you're playing against people who aren't as coordinated, you can pick people off, you can silence people out. But when they're really playing as a team, he becomes much harder to play.
For sure, no doubt. We kind of already touched on it, but I think from a community perspective, obviously we get a lot of feedback and that kind of stuff. What are some of the biggest misconceptions you hear from the community about what devs do, what is in your scope, that kind of stuff? What are some of those biggest misconceptions, Pon?
I think I can actually explain the story of what we did to one of the dev teams once. So back when I was cursed with Sparks, Best, Shadow Q, Zap. We came in, they showed us the new hell because we were like, Protein, we were just kind of exploring the studio. And we were like, oh, that's really cool. But what if her passive was different? And we just sat around the table, redesigned the passive through them, and bless them, they actually took it and did it. But I guarantee you that night they were like, this is a new art asset. This is a new programming task. This is a whole bunch of these things that we have to do to get this actually in the game if we want to like really get this in the game. And it really comes down to any change that you want to make often has like compounding things, especially in a game like Smite where you'd be like, oh, this pass would be really cool if it maybe had like 7 stacks instead of 6. Well, that's a new art asset. That's a new programming task. That's a new QA task where they have to go and actually test the ability to make sure it works on local, on network, on all these different
Possibly all the
environments.
different skins.
All the different skins potentially. You also have all the different environments potentially, right? And so that's, I think, the biggest thing is I used to think like, oh, game devs have this way of just like, they have these shortcuts that they can take to make things super optimized and really quickly to get done. And now on the side that I'm at now, it's like, oh, no, they actually just do all that work and somehow get it done in a reasonable amount of time to actually get it out to people.
Right.
And that is actually like magic.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the biggest misconception, the single biggest.
Yeah. I mean, all the time it's like, oh, well, I thought that you could just take a little slider and on her jumps would be a little bit faster. Or Hades 3 should be a little bit faster and just scoot, and we're good, and we're done. It is not that way.
Sometimes you can, but even on the easiest change, we still need to document it, make sure QA can test it. We have to go through platforms, certification processes with it. Like there's just, even on the smallest thing, and even things that people perceive as small just require so much work and so many different people across the whole team. It's crazy. And because of this concept of time and players not really understanding the time it takes to do things, that's where they often perceive us as not doing enough or not fixing things or not even being aware of things that need to be done or it's fixed. And that's just crazy. Like we have a spreadsheet that has 1,000 line items of ways to improve the game.
Yep.
Small things in the UI, bugs, things that we want to fix. That list never ends and it never empties. And we always are just ruthlessly prioritizing things to the top. And sometimes the players might disagree with what we prioritize, which that's reasonable.
Sure.
But we never have a shortage of things to do. We always have too much.
Man, I wish I had something else. Like, I wish I had something to do today. I've just got nothing to do.
And and it comes up a lot in our discussions with players, and even like when we get the new Olympians in from time to time, they're like, "Oh, what are you thinking about that?" It's like, it's already on the list.
Yep.
It's number like 72 though. Like, do you think it's more important than the party system? And they're like, "No, I don't." I'm like, "Okay, then it'll stay 72." You know, because we've got 70 things above it that we think are more important, and we do use the team, we use our gameplay experience, we use our community team to help us prioritize those things. But it's never a short list.
Sure.
We're never not aware of it. And we always want to be fixing and improving the game. And we work as hard as we can to get as many of those things in every single update.
Sure.
And it just takes, every little thing takes a lot more time and a lot more effort and a lot more planning and double checking and documentation and passing all these checkboxes than the players imagine. So sometimes we just don't. We don't deliver up on their expectations as hard as, even though we try as hard as we can.
You could do the shortcut, but the shortcut often comes with high risk and potential to make things worse than you started.
That's another really good misconception, is just about the nature of bugs and quick fixes and things like that. There's no bug-free product in the entire industry.
Right.
There's not a single one. There is always a risk of fixing something, breaking something else. Different things have higher level of connectivity within different games that have higher risk. I think SMITE has a pretty average level of risk when it comes to that type of thing compared to other games we've seen.
Sure.
And experiences we have as just players and devs and talking to friends at other companies and things like that. And it's just, you have to be really careful. You have to, a lot of times bug fixing, really the time comes from when you make the fix, having the QA team and everything evaluate a bunch of other things that could have been broken in the process, and or trying so many different edge cases on that bug. Is it actually fixed? Is just its chances decreased? There's such a spectrum.
Sure.
And a lot of people just see it as just fix it, check it off the list, it's done. There's like a million different possible scenarios that can occur in every single one of those situations. It's just, it's very time consuming and very work intensive to do that.
Sure. Absolutely. Clumsy, anything to add to those?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely echo all the sentiments that Pon and AJ said. I think just another misconception, that's more of a soft one, is that, like, it's not easy to make everyone happy, right? Whether it's a balance change or design decision, one of the problems you see on Reddit is, like, the mentality of groupthink and just an echo chamber. As soon as someone has a decent suggestion and maybe it was the right time of day and other people start following those comments and they start saying, like, hey, yeah, this is the best thing you could do to the game, whether it's a small balance change or whatever, and then maybe we go ahead and do it, but then you don't realize that, all these other people that may not even felt like they felt safe to talk in that Reddit thread beforehand are now going to make this opposite thread. It's like, guys, this was the worst mistake you've ever made. And what's even funnier is that sometimes you get this third Reddit thread just like, why did they listen to any of us? Like, just do their own thing. So the problem is you have, like, people on both sides of the fence and then in the middle. And in reality, I mean, all three of us, everyone at the company for the most part that's, actively working on this, we play SMITE. We know, we want the, yeah, right. We want. I
really saw a comment from today.
Yeah.
That said, Ajax thinks Mulan's 1 is a unique shape. Clearly, he doesn't play SMITE.
Right.
And I was like,
maybe slam some keys, man.
I got Hades from 1 to 10 in the Double Worshipper weekend last weekend, and Discordia from like 2 to 9 or something like that. Like, played a ton of games.
Yeah.
Across all different modes.
Sure.
I have 28 Diamond Gods or something like that.
I think
it's
like
it's not as much as like a full-time streamer or something like that, or like a pro player, because I hear 8 hours a day, and we play at least one game of SMITE a day.
Right, not including the play test.
We play at least one game of SMITE a day, sometimes 2. That doesn't count towards any of our account goals or our playtime or anything like that. So go ahead and add. I've been here 4 years.
That's
go ahead and multiply that by whatever, an hour a day.
365 times 2 times 4.
A misconception of, I mean, that's not even a misconception. That's just people being rude.
Right. Yeah. That's not. That's
we make mistakes. People who play the game way too much can make a mistake just as much as someone who plays the game once a week, right?
Yeah. The misconception I really was just trying to address is that, like, we are devs, we work for the game, we play the game, we want the game to be good.
Yeah.
That's the misconception.
All we're trying to do.
That's the whole point.
We're not doing this balance change because we think it's going to make the game worse. That hurts us.
Because we also want to have a job in the future, and so if the game's good in the future, then we'll have a job.
But even
in the
talking
future.
about the different Redditors and stuff, we balance between the pros, the different types of pros, the streamers and stuff. Sometimes the change you see is a little bit more balanced towards the streaming side, or maybe we do need to nerf Zeus because of Arena, whatever it is,
we don't.
right? But
we don't.
But we have to balance that, and that's that's the misconception I wanted to address.
Along that same line, is there one community request that you feel like you've seen a million times and you're like, stop asking, it isn't happening?
I feel like I've stamped out most of them.
You know what
now.
I mean? Like, is there one pet peeve community request that every time that you see it, you're like, mine is always like, just fix the animation, dude. Just make Hades 3 faster. I feel like that point has been proven that it's not that simple like a million times.
True. I mean, that one has nuance to it. That one's possible. There's ones that are much more. I mean, we get lots of complaints just around the concept of lag and latency.
Yeah.
Like, make it so that Australians can play with North Americans at the same ping. Just do it.
Right.
It's like, that's impossible. Literally, no one can do that.
Right.
Even the biggest, most expensive companies in the entire industry that had invested in their own undersea pipelines for data transfer still have a reasonable amount of ping.
Yeah, because speed of light is a thing.
Because of distance.
Right.
Literal geography.
Yeah.
They want us to solve. Like,
Well, just
when
bring
we
the
all
world.
it's like if the entire world was concentrated into one
Bring us
super
back to
mega
Pangea.
Jetson city. Yeah, Pangea.
Play that on
Pangea
Civ,
would have been
you
dope
know?
for gaming. Those dinosaurs, no frame drops.
They were,
God.
They were playing
Just
on land
one
all
server
the
in the
time.
center of Pangea and everybody is good.
Equal ping, no
But that's
complaining.
not the shape of the world. I can't fix
Right.
it. And other things like this comes up with like ghost hits and
Server client disagreement.
server client disagreement things. Like there's a whole lot of math going into there to get it as correct as it can in the most number of scenarios. But every now and then, since we do server-based gameplay, your client's not going to get the exact same imagery
Sure.
that the server gets. And that's important because if you do client-based gameplay, it becomes really easy to hack. You get a whole set of different issues that are just as bad, but people don't know what they are until you switch them.
Right.
I actually saw this come up on another Ask Reddit or another Twitter thread, not even related to Smite. And people were like, how come Monster Hunter can be played co-op with like perceivably no lag, and when I play like Dark Souls PvP, it's terribly laggy? And I was like, I don't see why this is not super obvious to you. The answer is the PvP.
Right.
When all of you are against a monster and you're not literally trying to dodge another player's inputs at a frame perfect comparison, you don't even notice it. Like, yeah, maybe I see the Rathian flying in the air and Pawns is still like rising up, and we don't even notice the difference of that because the game is reconciling between our two clients, and it doesn't affect the actual core gameplay.
Sure.
But in Dark Souls, when your immunity frame window in the PvP setting is like, half a second, let's say, you notice that when you get and the Dark Souls PvP is filled with ghost hits.
Yep.
And the community has mostly accepted it, which is, unfortunate that that's the reality of gaming, though. In some cases, and depending on your connection and your location, it's just impossible to fix.
Sure.
And certain games, just based on the actual design of the game, it has nothing to do with the tech. It has nothing to do with the netcode even. It's just the good design of the game. A co-op game, since your client is mattering more to the PvE, you're not going to notice that lag as much as you are in a PvP scenario.
Right.
And no one answered the question in that way. I was really surprised. Like, I didn't see that anywhere. I was like, it's just because it's a PvE game instead of a PvP game.
Right.
Or if Pawns Monster Hunter just clips out doing something laggy while I'm fighting the dragon, I'm not going to notice that nearly as often, right?
You're kind of just doing your own
Even
thing.
though it probably happens, just don't notice it as much.
Yeah, exactly. It's not as impactful.
I'm going to hijack one that I know is a pet peeve for other people in the room, but I also think is now a pet peeve for me, where I was previously didn't think it was that big of a deal. Hades dancing.
And it's during the ult. Yeah.
And that's the perfect example of something that sounds simple, but would require a pretty full rewrite of an entire animation system to properly support.
Sure.
And
Across how many skins?
And
why even?
And you do that, and maybe you make let's say like you make like 2% of the player base happy, right? Because you have a whole bunch of gods. How many are Hades mains? How many are Hades mains that really care about this? 2% is being very, very, very generous.
Yeah.
To do a full rework to the animation system versus maybe fixing any other number of bugs, adding any other number of features, putting programming towards other things, putting platforms towards other things, right? Like that's the kind of stuff where it's like, yes, I think it would be funny if Hades could dance. It would be fun, and I would actually, if I could just snap my fingers and have it in the game. There's still some concerns there, but I'd probably say, I think it's fine.
That's a good good point. The opportunity cost. Doing one thing stops us from doing another thing.
You only have
that
so many
kinda
things you can do.
Falls back into my discussion about misconception and time and like how many things we want to do. That's why we have to really be careful. One of the biggest reasons of why when people suggest something for us to do, the reason we don't do it is because it will literally take away time from doing something else.
Yeah. Speaking of that time, I know you guys don't have a lot of it, so we're gonna have to rapid fire a couple more.
Day today, right?
Okay. If you guys can take some extra time, all right.
Patch is in a good spot. Well, it's going to go out soon, right?
ooh,
They're just
I wanna go check
they're
the
finishing
feedback.
the final build and QA
yeah.
check before it should go
That's
live.
Okay.
Like,
All right. We'll try and speed it up
once
a little bit,
PTS
but not
goes
too
live, we'll
bad.
probably be wanting to be out there to collect feedback and stuff like that.
That's
I have
true.
a few meetings today too.
What were some development lessons that you learned the hard way? This is kind of I think we've
I
touched on
feel
this
like
a
I
little
learned
bit, but
everything the hard way. By the way,
nothing was
I
easy.
learned through failure a lot, a lot.
Any of them stand out to you?
No, I mean my school program did a really good job of teaching us a lot of these things. Honestly, I really shout outs to the UCF Central Florida's FIA program. It's run by ex-game devs, or all the professors, and like they treat it like a game studio. We barely had classes. You just get together in groups and you start making games, and you go through feedback reviews, and you do have some classes, but a lot of it is just doing that. You learn really quickly how frustrating it is if a designer's too overbearing.
Yep.
I mean, one of the things that I think actually helped my entire career the most ever was dealing with a difficult designer at that school. We were the two designers on one project, and this other designer was being really rude to the whole team and demanding things that they be done the way they wanted. And I had to like have a heart-to-heart with them and tell them they can't talk to people like that, and like it's clearly not working. And one of the other engineers in the team noticed that, and then when that person was going to be made a project lead, recommended me to be the project lead they wanted to work with. Essentially got me my first promotion. Which helped me get my internship. So the social aspect is still something we're still pushing, even in the company. A lot of people don't realize it about game dev, is that your interpersonal skills are really important. This is a really communication-driven field, and we have to deal with difficult problems, players being mad at us, stuff coming up last minute. People would rather work with someone who they can talk to and they can understand, rather than someone who's just really good at their jobs. Like the idea of the grandma's boy, I am a genius. Like everybody hates that guy just as much as that movie. It's a surprisingly accurate movie in some cases. That's true. And we're still pushing that. And a lot of time, even like when we're recently doing performance reviews with just our team, I'm like, Pawn Clumsy, you guys are great designers, but focus on inspiring the team and motivating the team and making sure they understand your thematic vision of the character. They know you can make good abilities. They know you can make they're not going to worry about that anyway, because the designers know all of the details of the damage and the hit area and all that anyway. Help them understand the actual victory of it all. And as opposed to me saying, Pon, your math and your spreadsheeting needs to get a little better, right?
Yeah, you need to understand pen a little bit better, Pon.
Because as this is something we're doing across the studio, and our engineering team is doing the same thing. Like, your code is awesome, keep it strong, but you need to be able to give feedback, give constructive criticism, that stuff. It really matters. And like I saw that firsthand really early in my career. It wasn't me, I guess, messing up too badly, but I've had moments of failure in this. I've had this moments of failure in this exact concept from time to time. We're like, man, I just did not explain that in a very good way, and I can tell, you can see it on their faces. People are just like okay, like I'll do it, but I'm not happy about it, and it hurts so much.
I think in a very similar sentiment of that, well, not necessarily just like an immediate failure that happened. It's kind of just balancing failure, because learning scope is just so important for basically everyone, but designers as well, because our job is really to be managers for the other team, right? We may come up with these great abilities, but we have to make sure that everything is within scope. So there's a lot of times with a lot of the different gods of projects that I've worked on where if we weren't able to manage scope together as a team, things could have gotten so much worse. So a good example of how things worked out but got pretty darn scary is like Jormungandr's Ultimate, right? We shot for the sky on that one, that's for sure. But there were times where we probably could have just balanced it out a little bit, just be very wary of all the other teams that we're impacting, right? Because it turned out to be pretty awesome, but there is a high chance of failure. And if things go poorly, it doesn't matter if you aimed for the sky. If you shot down and you missed completely and you whiffed and you've just caused like a massive delay, or you created a product that's just unusable, right? So it's really just managing scope and realizing that you may have a good idea, but you're affecting every other team, and that could have a lot of knock-on problems.
Yeah.
Overscope is a really common, like, hard lesson learned by game devs as soon as they start working. It's very, very common, yeah.
The phrase shooting for the moon so that you can land among the stars never made sense to me anyways, because stars are like further than the moon, so you would just end up like in orbit forever and you would die there.
Yeah,
It's a bad
eventually,
analogy.
space expands.
Yeah.
Yeah, my large feeling is yeah, the personal communication is because like we go through this process with our God development, especially that like when we finally are ready to have a kit and people start working on it. We're pretty confident with the abilities. We're pretty bought into the abilities. We know what we need to be concerned about and watch for it in case we need to pivot early. So it's often we've kind of done a lot to manage that, but making sure everyone's really excited for it, as well as managing just expectations of each ability. I know when I especially first started on God design, I often was kind of hands off because I felt like these are the animators, right? They know animation.
Right.
I don't want to go too far into their field. But if I'm not specific on things and I'm not willing to talk to them and am too vague, that's another problem that can occur where they don't actually feel like they have the freedom to do much because I've been so vague they don't really even have a clear direction to go.
Right.
That happened to me.
Yeah.
On Fafnir, the lead animator took me into a room and was like, you're being way too pushy with this. You need to back off.
Yeah.
And I was trying to understand the balance of
Yeah.
how, because it's the art team and the engineering team, they want clear direction, clear goals, but there's a very gray area between micromanaging them and getting clear direction, and it's actually different from person to person, stuff like that.
Right.
So like our one of our tech director now, I've worked very closely with my whole career here at Hi-Rez. We started together on Scotty and Amaterasu, and we're both managing those teams. So I can get pretty pushy with him, or like as long as I keep it to chats directly to us, I'm like, yo, what about that? I can be straight up, but you cannot do that with everybody. You have to be really careful.
Sure.
Yeah, literally with an upcoming character, we had a meeting yesterday about a specific challenge that we have with some particle effects, and I found that the best way to approach that really is restate goals that we have for the ability, restate kind of like traditional things that we've done in the game so far, and then pose potential options and kind of directions that I think could be cool. But I do leave the final call up to the FXRs because at that point I've given them the things that I'm concerned about, the goals that I really think are important. But they're the ones that have the master of the craft. They're the ones that have the tools. They're the ones that they're able to take that and really shape it into something really cool. And that's worked out for a lot of the gods since I've learned that lesson is that kind of style.
You learned that the biggest part about being a game designer is just asking the right questions.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell anyone what to do.
Right.
If you can just ask them, what type of theme or what type of tone is this animation conveying? What type of character do you feel like this is?
Gotcha.
Things like that. And even when I'm working with just within the design team, try not to ever tell these guys exactly what to do with their characters.
Right.
But I'm like, is this type of character something you want to focus on, this skill shot, or do you want this to be like more of a minor feature?
Right.
And help them focus and prioritize that way just by having a conversation, not ever demanding anything. A lot of people imagine designers or game directors in the more, like I said, like
You
the
do
fictional
this.
sense. Like, here's my beautiful vision, and you're going to do that, and you're going to do that, and it's just that's not how it works most of the time. It's just, and if you do try to work like that, you're going to burn people out. You're going to frustrate people.
Yeah.
Your chances of success are a lot lower.
Absolutely. If there was one thing that you could go back and change about an old god, whether it be kit-wise, lore-wise, look-wise, coding-wise, something like that,
That
from a
we've
god
worked on, or
no,
any of them?
either one I think is fine. I kind of envisioned like ones that were maybe like the alpha or beta gods, that kind of stuff. But if there's one thing that comes to mind for a god that you've worked on, that's fine as well.
Oh man, this is tough. See, all the things that I really like to do in games are things that I know are broken and bad. Like, for example, Arachne. Old Arachne had the pull and the trap spider webs.
Yeah.
That was that has a whole bunch of problems of setup is really difficult to do. The variance on success is super high. The frustration of the opponent that you're fighting is really, really high because if they get pulled, they feel like they are helpless and they can't do anything. Old Kali had similar things where she literally just ran at max movement speed and hit you with an instantaneous cone that had no animation or tell. Right? Those are the things that like I personally would like to have because they feel broken and that's fun to play as.
Right. Two assassins that you played a lot of in your career. You'd want those back.
I can't think of anything really that we've done where I at least don't understand the arguments for why it has changed in the way that it has and why we've gone the direction that we have. I don't think I really look at anything and be like, that was clearly a big mistake.
Sure. Yeah, understandable.
I would definitely wish I had this is something I designed too. The and we still have problems with it all the time, which is the UI element that's used for Kali and Morrigan. That I know exactly why. Like Pon mentioned, I know exactly why we did it, because we wanted to give players true unlimited choice
Right.
at any time. Because any other sort of targeting element in the world would have been very restrictive, or would have had vision issues or something else. So we wanted to really just make it a true choice mechanic, but I think that has been outweighed with the game flow. Like in Smite, generally we want to keep you in the game. We don't want you menuing. Menuing doesn't really feel good. That's why it's designed to, you have to be in the base, you have to be in your safe area where you cannot be hurt. You're regenning. You're generally immune. To when you're going through the menu. Even Chang'e is really hard to play. Although I love her, I enjoy playing her. I know that a lot of players have difficulty using her passive effectively with the menuing. So that's the one thing I designed really, would be that Kali and Morgan. And we've still talked about do a targeter in the world or changing it in other ways. It's just really hard to give players that true choice and design this in a different way. Like maybe it would have been better if Morgan just had to hit someone with something and then she would become them. It takes away a lot of the choice element, but it would be a much more like normal feeling Smite ability, still with a really, really cool twist, but you would actually fire it like an ability would feel better.
We struggled with that same problem with even Chernobog, right? The first one that I worked on. Because for his ultimate, we're just like, well, you kind of want to choose who you want to go to. Do we just do the wheel? Because then you get perfect choice. Like, Athena and Neith have a little bit of those issues too. But we tried to keep it as, to keep that Smite gameplay fluid as much as possible. But even then, there's only so much you can do. I mean, exactly. Global selection is not easy. So we did a lot of things to mitigate it. But, there's still some people who say that they want that back.
Morgan and Kali a targeter more like Chernobog's, where you can just
what I'm
aim
trying
at
to get
anyone,
at is there's a lot of complaints still even about Chernobog's, and I still see people going like, hey, just make it a wheel instead.
So a lot of times we know we're pushing ourselves to do really unique stuff. But that's going to have downsides. I can't think of anything, honestly, from the game like that's been outside my controller before I've been here or anything like that.
Yeah,
It's
like
all been...
I can think of things that are like, it was kind of sad to lose, like when Odin got initially reworked, where he lost that Raven shout and he lost the passive to see over walls, because those are cool nuance things. And so like I can see why things are changed, and I understand that, but I can also be like, but I like that's the kind of like stuff that I like to break and utilize, and those extra like little things at like a very top level. But I also know that like that's not really everyone's experience with that ability either. So like again, I can't think of anything that I feel like is like just bad. It's just different.
I can defend most of the old reworks too, and I have on many occasions.
What are some of the most OP things that you got to play in a play test, like a development one? I know mine.
I know mine.
I mean, I don't know mine instantly, but one recently that that definitely came up to mind was Baron's ulti when you had increased movement speed.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
When I played Baron for the first time, you didn't move slower in your ultimate. You went faster.
Yeah,
and I remember you were playing Mercury, and I was on a mid camp, and you came behind me, and I just immediately ulted, and you dashed away, and I just zoomed around the bend and caught you, and I heard you on the other side be like,
different
so
because Baron had like 3 different
so
ultimates.
Baron
No,
had
it was
different
his
ultimates
current-
during development. He initially was going to ride the coffin like a surfboard in the sky and like fly to people and do things. So that's why when we reworked his ultimate to be the pole, it was like, well, yeah, he's riding. He used to ride that. He used to go fast. Let's keep him going fast. That just is too good.
it was really good.
I don't have as many good stories on this because honestly, and these guys know, I tend to perform pretty poorly with gods that I've played the first time. So a lot of the development gods, when I first play them, it takes me a few games to really get ramped up. I'm going to make mistakes, or I'm going to be distracted because I'm going to be focusing on the god, their feel, and their hit areas and stuff like that. I'm not even going to notice that Pon's rotating to gank me because I'm focused on giving feedback on how the god plays, but then I'm playing Conquest against Pon and Chaos, so I'm going to get blown up. So that happens most of the time. So a lot of times when the gods are in the more fluctuating balance state, I don't feel like I'm really crushing people. A lot of times it'll happen where like Pon will go 12-0 with a new god, and then they're like, okay, AJ can try it, and I'll like go barely even or something like that because I'm struggling with it, or I'm paying attention to the mechanics instead of the game. But I'm sure there's a god that I've played that I really just 12-0'd everybody when it was in development. I don't remember what it is.
I think I finished that Baron game like 22-1 or something
Yeah.
like that, and I was like, holy god.
trying to
A
think
somewhat
of which
recent one that we talked about just a little bit, which is it's a good timing now, was the pre-rework internal one for Bastet, where we wanted to try the ultimate just being a single fire cat, just right because right now
yeah, I
it's
remember
the
that.
3. You know, you have
Yeah.
the 3 cats previously, and so we wanted to do, let's not change it too much. It's just one cat you can fire on a
Like an
lower
Agni
card.
Bomb.
Right, exactly,
Right,
like
right.
an Agni Bomb.
Yeah.
And oh boy, with no other changes is what that was just so frustrating because you just
Oh, boy.
you just jump onto the mid laner, throw a cat, come back like 10 seconds later, throw a cat, and like
It was
it's just
insane.
not fun for anyone but Bastet.
I remember because we talked about that. I remember playtesting that for mid-season last
Yeah,
year.
'cause
or
that was a
something
long
like
one in
that.
development.
And Taco was in that playtest.
Oh,
And
my
Taco was
gosh.
playing Bastet. And I remember like I'll be like, yo, she's like fighting my back camps. I'm like, yo, I'll be there in like 2 minutes. I gotta clear red. And she like casually 1v3'd and was like, I had a cat for everyone. What did I need?
She
And
was
I
giggling
like,
the entire time.
oh, I understand.
We definitely had bugs. I feel like there was a god recently that was just doing way more damage than intended. Do you remember who it was?
No, but we also have like playtests where someone just is doing true damage.
Yeah,
that's
exactly, the
Because
true
that's the
damage
default
fields.
damage type on our devices. So if we don't actually remember to go in and change it, we go to a playtest and someone gets blown up. It's like, oh yeah, that just did true damage to me.
That feels
We
good.
definitely had a character recently where the damage was just set like absurdly high for one of the first playtests. You just walk around and you just go boop, and someone would just like lose like 90% of their health.
That was it was Heimdall, and it was specifically so you know the version of the bug with the basic attack where like
your power
the
goes
power
crazy?
would go crazy.
Yes.
He had a different version of that bug at the start, and
Okay.
like his basic attacks would just like immediately kill you.
That's okay, yeah.
My example of the thing that was most broken in playtest, which was more of a fun broken than an actual real broken, was Medusa. Medusa had like a kind of like predator stealth where like you like were like 95% invisible, and that has problems that like especially targeter
Textures.
overlay.
We've officially ruled out ever
Yeah.
doing that ability, by the way, because when
Yeah.
you overlay other particle effects and targeters in Smite, it makes really
Yeah, you
bad
make-
visual issues.
And you can see a clear outline. But I remember just following Tina for like a minute and a half. And Tina's like, I haven't seen Pawn in a while. Where's he at? And I'm like, Tina, behind you. And she's like, wait, what? And you can see her stop. Her character model turns. She's staring. And she goes, oh. And then like I just immediately blow her up.
That's great. It's like
And
playing
like,
the hidden.
yeah, that was one play test.
I haven't played that game in a
We were
long
basically
time.
able to
Good
like
game.
imagine like Loki stealthing you, except
Sure.
as a hunter that can
Permanently.
just permanently do that.
One of,
That's
the worst,
terrifying.
one of the worst playtests ever was the one when there was a bug where Jorm's breath, the audio, was an infinite loop
Oh yeah.
and global. So as soon as any one Jorm did any one basic attack, the entire team would just hear for the entire match. And everyone was just
take
like
their headsets
take
off,
their
yeah.
headsets off. Like, we were just like, we can't play. Everyone was like tilted. We're like, like we usually do at the end of the day. Everyone was like, I don't even want to play. Like I'm going home. Like
Right.
it was
It's
just
ruined my day.
it was torture.
That's so funny.
And I don't know how that happened, but oh man, it was rough.
But to wrap it up, one of our favorite things that we do on Roll Queue is have the players describe each other's play style, what it's like to play against each other. But that is not as good for you guys, obviously. But if you could try and do your best to describe what each other are like as devs, like I know I like to joke around with Pon about anytime he's designing a new god, there's going to be an execute or true damage somewhere in the kit, right? Like that's got to be in there somewhere. But when you think about each other's design styles and the gods that they make,
That's
like,
a tough question.
it is a tough question, yeah. If you could try and put that into words, that'd be good. We could start with AJ Gods, Pon. What comes to mind with AJ
Or
Gods?
they don't even necessarily
my
think of me as a
gosh.
god designer anymore, though. Because
Yeah.
I've just
Sure.
been like in more of the management role
Sure.
I mean,
for
AJ
like 2 years now.
AJ has self-described his style, which is he always starts with like the gimmick,
Sure.
the main gameplay hook, goes 1,000% on the hook, and then figures out where to remove it. Like
Tara could summon walls in every single ability,
Yeah.
including her basic attacks.
Oh, her basic attacks. Well, that was crazy.
She could summon walls with her basics.
Yeah.
Yeah, her hit chain was one wall, little mini wall summon.
yeah.
And her
That'd be
basic attack
insane.
had a melee targeter and a range targeter that was always there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that's AJ's style, and then I think Clumsy's style is he's very good at finding like the inherent kit combos and things. Like Trinabog has the combo, Yorm has like the really satisfying combo of the breath into a knock up that like spreads 3 into like pulling the breath. Like whenever I play like on any one of his kits, I kind of understand what like my intended flow is.
Sure.
Which is also why it was really cool to see Umoja, right? Because Umoja had a lot more flexibility in those combos, but they were still there.
Right.
Yeah.
So like that was just really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. AJ, what comes to mind when you think about a pawn god?
I mean, I think of Pawn as like the architect and Clumsy as the artist.
Sure.
When it comes to designing gods, Pawn is very matter of fact and very like specific. And not to say that either of you don't display both traits from time to time. You just slightly skew towards a little bit more of one or the other. I joke around a lot that I can't play pawn gods because they're
really
too hard.
Right.
But I also know that we also know that our community is really gets really excited about gods they can't play apparently.
Right.
Which I have the numbers. They don't play them very well. Most of them don't. But I still am like, pawn, give them what they want. Give them what they want. Let's make this really tough. And I'm like, I know I can't play it, but that's okay. Or I'll be able to learn it a little bit, or I'll be able to assess the like easy to learn, difficult to master quality of it.
Yeah.
And then Clumsy works really well with just overall tone and theme and getting everything to come together really nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If I could interject real quick before you go, Clumsy, pawn gods definitely, it's like difficulty is number one, which I love. I love when a pawn god comes out because I'm like, I'm not going to know what the hell this character does for a little bit, and then I'm going to slam people with it. Like as soon as I started understanding set, I think I went like 10-0 in my next 10 games with him. Like I love that about it. And I think you worded the way that Clumsy designs really well is that Clumsy, I think a lot of your gods feel really satisfying to play. Like they might not be as complicated as pawns, and that's probably a good thing for a lot of the player base. Right. Yeah, it'd be really tough.
Scares me how many difficult gods we have in the game.
But like I don't know that there's anything that I find as satisfying anymore in Smite as over the wall 2-1 comboing someone with purple Merlin and then flickering in and change dancing and killing the whole team. Like nothing feels that good.
Is so awesome
in the game.
And Merlin and Jorm really just
satisfying is the word that comes to mind for sure.
Fit right into that concept.
Clumsy, what do you think of when you think of these two
on a
gods?
similar note, when we're talking about pawns gods, they definitely have a higher skill floor and a higher skill ceiling, but I think that comes with like special nuances with each one of the gods, and you get more of those moments. So we're talking about the different satisfying times, but when you finally like actually achieve an understanding of a pawn god, you can do things that you can't really do with a lot of the other gods. Like you can actually like pull things off that feel more satisfying, I think, than the general god. And I think that there's always something to value in that.
Sure,
so that's a lot of fun to reach that point where you've overcome that skill floor and you would think you're actually doing really sick.
Right,
and that's always fun.
Right. What about for AJ?
Beyond design structure, though, there's also a little bit of like communication style.
Sure.
And I think we're a little bit of a spectrum where like Pawn, I think, is the most like kind of cool and technical and straightforward, and Clumsy is balanced, and I'm like all on passion and emotion, and I'm like, I don't care if it's balanced, it's got to be beautiful and explode, and we could tweak the numbers
You're the
later.
Charlie Day, crazy, all the strings connecting everything.
But I think it works really well within our team dynamic, and I think like our developers who work with us, they get a little bit of appreciation of those different features, and we don't burn them out because we're a different experience working with each of us too, which I think helps.
And we temper each other, right? Like because if I get too analytical on things, often I'll talk to you guys about like feelings of stuff, and like we'll talk about like how the ability feels and functionally, and like change timings or like maybe like the effect isn't really conveying what it needs to, and like that's really good to help just temper this the kind of madness, because I'll be like, this ability does 52.5 damage at this rank.
A lot of times I'll be like, Pawn, rephrase, but give me the one-liner.
Right.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
And I'll often come to Pawn and be like, I need some help balancing some of these numbers because it doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. What do you think of when you think of AJ gods, Clumsy?
Between AJ's gods and AJ's design style, I mean, they both said it pretty well, and I think AJ's previous comments on the passion and stuff, but it helps with not just his god designs, but when he was working with us, which is super helpful, is just like getting the overall theme of everything together, right? Like whether it's Amaterasu or Scotty or Fafnir, you always feel like, you have a good theme of that character when you're playing that character, and it's really important when he's working with us because he tries to impart that onto us too, right? Is to get whatever character we're creating to have that theme as a focal point so that the players are playing the character that they've heard of, right? Whether it's Mulan or whatever, you feel like you're playing this kind of a character.
Sure. We definitely learned that through a couple different ways that the MOBA players, they care a lot more about theme. And when we say theme, we're not just referring just to art or visuals or style. It's making sure that the mechanics and the gameplay and the actual style of fighting syncs up with their visuals and their lore and their perception and expectations, and getting all of those things to align is really difficult. And that's one of the things, the services I tend to provide to try to help with the team, as I'm not in the nitty gritty of the God design as much as these two are, trying to help balance those things or help point out, ooh, do we think this still fits with the theme, or is this kind of a pivot? Is this going to be an intentional pivot, or is this something you weren't expecting? And things for us to just make sure we're understand what types of implications our changes will have.
Sure.
Yeah, that was a key lesson I learned from going from our first two gods, where when I finally got to Pele and was talking to AJ about the theme, because she's not a mage is what a lot of people would have expected, but she's an assassin, but we still wanted her to feel like the goddess of volcanoes. And getting that theme together on board was, I think, super helpful for how she came out.
Yeah, I can't imagine her as not an assassin anymore.
Yeah.
Me neither.
We've done this a few times too, and I'm kind of blanking on a good example right now, but a couple times where like the abilities don't have to be overly complicated, or the whole kit gimmick doesn't have to be really mind-blowing, but if things have a nice bit of novelty to them, a nice bit of familiarity to them, and really the concept and the theme is something new and diverse from the rest of the game, the feedback from the players is actually quite positive. And especially if the art looks really awesome and goes along with that, it all comes together and people tend to really like those characters, even when they're not the most mind-blowing technically. Right.
It's a combination of everything for sure. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining us for Roll Q. I think this is a great way to kick off season 7. Season 7 is going to be a great year, no doubt about it. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time here on Roll Q.